Welcome to the Germinate podcast, where agriculture, business, and innovation take root and thrive. I'm Joe Sampson, and with nearly 2 decades of experience in agricultural equipment and scaling businesses, I'm here to bring you actionable insights, inspiring stories, and strategic advice. Whether you're an industry veteran or just starting out, this podcast is your guide to cultivating ideas, expanding your knowledge, and growing your venture. So let's get started and germinate your path to success. Today, we've got a really special guest, and I'm super happy to have Mr. Gary Wickham on from MagrowTec. Gary and I have known each other now for not that long, 4 or 5 months, but Mr. Gary Wickham, pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. Great to talk to you again, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you, my friend, we just had kind of a conversation before, are the definition, I would say, of probably a serial entrepreneur. So let's start with that. Give everybody a little bit of your background, how you got to where you're at today. It's a super exciting story, and they're going to notice right off the bat that you aren't from this country, my friend. You are from a land with a nice little accent of Ireland. So yeah,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Hopefully your listeners can understand me. We tend to speak a bit quicker here in Ireland. Yes,
Yep.
I'm living in Dublin, Ireland. Funny enough, I spent a lot of my time in the US working for US multinationals. But if I go back to my childhood, when I was born, in the late 60s, and I lived with my family of 9, my parents and 7 children, so I have 6 siblings. We didn't have much, there was no internet, no phones. My mother didn't work, but she obviously looked after us at home, worked very hard. My father joined the Irish Army at 14 and a half.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
yeah, so his father wasn't around, and to help the family, he lied about his age. And even though the instructor knew he was lying, he thought he was older. So he joined the construction corps of the Irish Army at 14 and a half, joined the full corps at 15 and a half, went through the whole and became a soldier. Ended up with working with the United Nations peacekeeping troops in Africa. And funny enough, his brother sadly was killed with the United Nations peacekeeping troop in the Congo. And so, they had a difficult life and a sad life in that regard. Meanwhile, my mother kind of kept the family together, managing, a family of 9 on one salary. My father had a kind of a lucky break. One of the guys in the army took him under his wing and taught him how to become a lab technician. And then for the next 6 years, while he was in the army, my father went to Queen's University at night in Northern Ireland to learn microbiology. And then he became a fully certified and trained microbiologist. The reason I say that is that he used to then bring me, when he left there to work for the Irish government in the health service, he used to bring me to the laboratories on a Saturday morning. And never drove in his life, walked everywhere.
Oh, really?
I remember 2 things: trying to keep up with him because he walked so fast, and number 2, just playing with the microscopes and looking at things under the microscopes, and that brought me my kind of love of science and how I ultimately ended up in science. I think my passion for it. But I think the one thing I learned about my parents, they went through a lot, their resilience, their kind of resolve. My mother, she was working hard in the background and she was very caring. So she not only gave of things, she gave of herself. So she constantly helped others, cared for others, whether it's relatives, friends, and she was very generous in all respects. And both of them were very hardworking and caring and decent people. And we didn't have much, but we had a very happy home. And then that led me to go down the science route, and I ended up, working at 13 or 14 years of age in as a lounge boy, as a barman, to pay my way through college, and paid for myself. Got my degree in applied science, physics, chemistry, mathematics. Then went to work for Loctite, an American multinational. Everybody thinks of Loctite as super glue, which
Yeah,
it,
the red stuff, right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I ended working as a process chemist in their European headquarters in Ireland, and we made all the products that led to the advent of phones becoming smaller, faster, lighter, and cheaper, because they all had these big, bulky, small or phones, and you had this big chip scale packaging inside. And we basically developed 2 products: an encapsulant that protected the product against the circuitry against moisture and heat, and then also to conduct signals through gold particles in the adhesive, believe it or not, in epoxy adhesive. And so that allowed for Nokia and Ericsson and others then to make smaller, faster, cheaper phones that became more affordable. You'd never
Wow.
think an adhesive to do that. We
No,
made the products that held the tiles in the space shuttle. We made products for the U.S. military in war situations where they would actually use glue to seal wounds together or for internal operations. Unbelievable, right?
that is crazy.
Yeah, and so
Uh,
then I became involved in the M&A team, and so I became head of manufacturing for M&A worldwide. So I used to meet with colleagues from America, from Europe, from Asia, and we'd look at where we do acquire companies, and I would do the due diligence. And then when we did acquire them, we'd look where we'd make them. So I ended up opening and closing facilities around the world. And then I was helping our American colleagues with new facilities in the US, in Connecticut. And then we were bought by Henkel. And then when we were bought by Henkel, we ended up closing their equivalent in Hanover. So I was put in charge of that project. And then we ended up making clean rooms to make these microelectronic products for phones and other products. And that needed clean room technology. And we also made the product, as I said, for the US military, and that needed a distillation facility and a clean room. So I learned about FDA approval. And so
Jeez.
after learning all that and building new facilities from scratch,
Right.
so after doing all that, that led me to become MD of a US pharmaceutical company making actives for antacids and antiperspirants, similar chemistry. And then at that point, I jumped into my first startup, which we might want to talk about. So that's a
Of
whistle
course.
tour from where I came to get into entrepreneurship.
That's an I mean, it's an unbelievable story. First of all, to unpack it a little bit, one of 9 children, and your father goes to the army at age 14. I have a 14-year-old son right now, and there's no chance in heck. Well, number 1, I would be so scared, but number 2, like, he's not ready. So, different times, good for him, and I love what you said too about your mom, like, we didn't have a lot, but we had a happy home, and I think that's so important for anybody growing up that, it's not easy for that, people leave and do all these things, it's not easy to keep that stuff together, and so the phrase, "Behind every good man, there's a great woman," came to mind, and yeah, yeah, so that's awesome. So you're a kid, you're walking to the lab, you're looking in a microscope, you get into all this stuff, you start making you work for a was Loctite an American company?
Yeah, it was headquartered in Connecticut, and then Henkel, the German multinational, bought them eventually. But yeah, Loctite in its own right, very strong brand, and was headquartered in Rocky Hill in Connecticut. So I used to spend a lot of time in Connecticut, flying in and out of Hartford and dealing with technology transfer, new product introduction, then the M&A side. Yeah, so my love for working for American companies started then.
Yeah.
I traveled around the world and learned about innovation, technology, and product transfer, and that's helped me in MagrowTec, of course.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think some of those early lessons are from when you were a kid, going to the lab or working at Loctite? Because I'm assuming you weren't very old. That was like one of your first jobs out of school, or
Yeah, I think it was 19 or 20. Yeah.
yeah. So you're a young boy at this point in time, and you've gotten all the way to where you're at today, which we're going to talk about. But what are some of those early? Did you have kind of that aha moment when you were a young guy and you're like, you know what, this is my path. This is where I want to go.
Yeah, I think from an early age when I started doing my science undergraduate degree, I loved that. So I knew I was on the right path. And I obviously going in with my father, every Saturday morning, I kind of did like science. I was intrigued, looking at bacteria and so on. I never knew quite which area to go into. And there wasn't many opportunities in Ireland then, when I started in Loctite. And I was actually due to go to the USA for a year, and because I loved the states, and having been there on J1 working student visas, and then the college rang to say Loctite we're looking for somebody, and I did the interviews and psychology test, and I got the role. And it's one of those sliding door moments that I was happened to be in the house when the phone rang, and
Yeah,
one of those things that was maybe meant to be. But the thing about science is that it's intriguing. You have a lot of people saying, well, I don't understand science or I don't believe in it. But at the end of the day, to me, it's all about data. Can you replicate? If you think of a farmer on a farm, they want to see if you have a new technology that it'll deliver an ROI, return on investment. It'll work in a farm scenario. It'll work in robust conditions, repeatedly, consistently. That's data. You want to give them evidence and their data that this thing is working. And science is no different, right? Science, there might be different inventions, but it's got to show that something works consistently and solves a real problem. And so that's what I love about science. It gives you the tools. It's not the complete answer to help solve big problems, right? And so I love that. And then I did a master's with Loctite, an MBA, while I was working with them. I used to work and do lectures 1 to 9 on a Friday, 9 to 1 on a Saturday, while I was working till 9 o'clock at night for 2 years. And then I finished my master's, and 6 weeks later, I got married. And so it was pretty chaotic, but that
Yeah.
was normal in those days, pretty
Yeah,
chaotic.
I hear you. Talk a little bit about what it's like to do business in Ireland and in the culture. And you said, "Hey, I had these aspirations and dreams to come to America and work at and work in Connecticut." Is that the way it was then? Is that still the way it is now? I'm sure things have developed and adapted now to we're doing in business, and we live in such a global world today. But give us a little bit of a background on the culture and what it's like.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of people may or may not know Ireland became a free state after the War of Independence in 1921. So it became a free state in 22 and broke from the Commonwealth in 47, 48, if I have my figures correct. Relatively young country. The US is a young country. I think it's celebrating 250 years next year, 1776, I think, if I've got
That's
my.
correct. Yeah. Hopefully my math is right. I better know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a big milestone. So we're a really young country, and we were a very poor country in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But some key decisions were made, and the Irish government at the time decided to make education free and provide free health cover. Two key things that stand to us today. The net result of that is that Ireland has, certainly in Europe, has the highest level of people attending university anywhere in
Okay.
Europe per capita. So the reason I say that is that we have a well-educated workforce,
Yeah.
speak English, so we've one culture. We're members of the European Union, so it's a great access for companies, American companies that want to enter into Europe. And we've a very good tax base. I think most companies now, with the new rules, have a minimum corporate tax base of 15%. So it's a level playing field, but we've a lot of advantages there. We're small, we're innovative, we're nimble, and productivity of the Irish workforce is very high. And so the net effect of that is that most American companies have their European headquarters in Ireland. Like nearly every pharmaceutical company, Meta, Google, they're all here. And the net
Wow.
effect of that is that Dublin is very cosmopolitan, and
Mhm.
they recruit people from all over the world. And so you've got a lot of people who are learning with these big multinationals. And indeed, that's the path I went. And so you have a lot of skilled people now beginning to set up companies that work for these multinationals and spend a lot of time in the US learning and working. And you asked me a question which I don't think I fully answered. Me personally, with Loctite and from living in my family and learning from my parents, I learned to be humble, to be fair, to be honest, to listen. A lot of people like talking and not listening. Try not to be an expert on everything. The people you're speaking to usually are the experts. That could be a customer. They know more than you do. So you got to learn from them and try to help people, try to be fair. And then working for American multinationals, I learned loads. They were very, helpful in on me understanding and learning and training. And once I got to a certain thing, they just let me at it. They trusted me. And so that's why I've always loved working for multinationals, American multinationals, and they're everywhere here. And so the next generation of Gary Wickhams are coming out of Ireland left, right, and center.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception maybe of Ireland and maybe Dublin in and of itself is okay. It's this place that everybody goes to the Guinness factory, gets 3 or 4 pints of Guinness in them, and then that's Dublin, that's Ireland, and maybe Conor McGregor and Rory McIlroy.
Yeah, yeah.
You just said something that kind of blew my mind. You're like, all these American companies are headquartered in Dublin. Their European headquarters are in Dublin, which is it kind of speaks to the real Ireland. That's where the movers and the shakers are going, probably because it's very easy to do business with Ireland and the US. right?
Yeah, 100%. Very easy to do business, access to, 350 million people, European market,
Yeah,
27 countries, a good tax base, highly educated workforce, and the government provides supports, for land and facilities to build these. And a lot of these companies are here for the long haul. I mean, if I go back to some of the pharmaceutical companies that are here and ICT companies, they're here 20, 30, 40 years. So it's been very good to both, to the companies and to the Irish people and to the Irish country.
yeah,
And so I think in that period, we've become very modern as well. So it's a bit like Africa. If you go to Africa, people are surprised that they're using their phones to pay for everything way quicker than we were because
exactly.
they missed that iterative process. Ireland is a bit like that. We had a bit of catching up to do, but we kind of leaped in certain areas.
Yeah.
So that's on the back of these companies helping us as well.
Yeah. And they maybe put a bow on this. I think a lot of people need to get out of their own backyard, their own state. I'm speaking directly to Americans, their own backyard, their own state, their own county, whatever it may be, and then get out of the country and kind of see how the world lives. I was fortunate enough to travel all over the world, and it's funny, everywhere I went, everybody is still doing that same thing. They're trying to work hard, provide for their family. It's boil it down, it's really relatively simple. And we're such a global world now that I think that's even more critical today to just get out there and see the world and know that we're all doing the same things and trying to go and striving for the same goals for sure.
Yeah, and we've all got common goals for sure, and sometimes
For
people
sure.
don't understand each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing about Ireland being such a small country, and we have a visa sharing program. A lot of Irish students, huge numbers every year, go to the US working for the summer as waiters, bartenders, you name it, just to get experience of working abroad at a young age and learning to deal with people. And then even on internships, working with different departments, and that instills confidence and humility as well in terms of how to deal with different scenarios and so on.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important thing. I mean, people are surprised when I go to the States and tell them that I've been in about 36 states. I know every capital of every 50 US states. I know where they are geographically. The same with Canada, the same with South America, because I make it my business when I go somewhere to understand not just the customer, the people, how
Yeah.
they live, where they live. Even the direction of rivers. For example, the Red River is the only I'm aware of it. The only river in America that goes south north. I think.
I'll
Up,
take your word because I have no idea. I'll
yeah,
take your word for it.
and I know about the American Civil War, the War of Independence. I try to understand, where I live and the history and the culture and, the people so that I can deal with them better, at least be a bit more knowledgeable.
That's super intelligent, man. I think that everybody should take that on, and it's so intelligent to do that anytime you're traveling abroad. Try to get yourself engulfed into the culture and the
Yeah.
people and, become one of them, and you've definitely done that. I broke bread with you over here in the States. In fact, in my home state of Iowa before, and it's like an old friend coming over. So you're really good at it, Gary. Uh, let's kind of pivot here to you're at Loctite. You kind of move on to some other careers, and then at some point in time in your journey, you decide, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I'm gonna start and find a business. So bring us up to speed there.
I wish it was that organized. It was
Okay.
slightly by accident. I never knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I really didn't. I knew a couple of things. I worked very hard, and I always knew if I was doing anything for myself, I would continue to work very hard, and I always had to put 100% into everything.
Mhm.
Which as an entrepreneur, you cannot get away with not putting 100%. So a friend of mine who was in Loctite, I'd moved on to become MD of a US pharmaceutical company.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You said that. Yep.
Yeah, and he came to me and said, "Look, I have an apartment in Dublin. His brother's an IT guy, and they start doing short-term lets, and they were getting way more business than they could handle." And he came to me, and then we said, "Well, maybe there's a business idea in this." So we got together in my house, met in the dining room in my house for a year while I was still MD of a pharmaceutical company, and we got a guy from the hotel industry again, somebody who knows the sector.
Yeah.
The guy from the hotel industry, myself, and the IT guy came aboard. The other guy remained in Loctite for 4 years, and literally we set up what is now Stay City service apartment business. And basically, we rented 27 apartments. I remortgaged my house to put my share in. I got my brother to put money in. My business partner put money in, and we used that to rent those first 27 apartments. And then I cleaned the apartments. I did reception. I fitted out the apartments. I didn't go home for a month, and my third child had just been born. And then basically we turned that into now what is a $300 million business with about 1,500 employees in about 15 cities in Europe.
Good for you, man. That's an amazing story. And you said it. You have to be. You basically missed the birth of your third child because you're on the floor, you're cleaning, you're grinding, you're doing all roles, and uh, I can relate. I'm an entrepreneur now as well, and it's not for everybody. It's not easy. I think you said in our kind of pre-call, what 9 out of 10 of them fail.
Correct. 9 out of 10 fail.
It's pretty easy to be the 90%. It's really hard to be the 10%, right?
Yeah, and they, I do talk on entrepreneurship, rarely because I'm too busy running the business, and that's the priority. And during that, I have a few slides, and I like to engage the audience. And early on, I say, what do you think is the most important thing for an entrepreneur to succeed? And I get the usual, cash, having the right team, the right go to market. A lot of those are good answers. And then I put a picture of my wife. Not that my wife is very happy about it, but I do put a picture of my wife. And they go, "Who's that lady?" And it's my wife. And they said, "Well, nice lady. Why are you putting her here?" And I said, "Well, without my wife, I wouldn't be here talking to you today, because the number one commitment is from your wife or your partner, because you're going to be." I was there for the birth of my child, but I wasn't there much in the weeks after. So if you put the long hours, and I'm talking long, long days and sleepless nights, and you try, she's your only sounding board. She's your sanity check as well,
Right. Yeah.
and or your partner for that matter. And you do all of that, and there's days you're going, have I done the wrong thing? Your days you don't know how you're going to pay the staff in those early days, and there's days when everything just comes in on top of you. And as I call them, the two R's, resolve and resilience. You need that to shine through. You need to battle, constantly battle, to come through the other side, but fight the headwinds, the many headwinds. And there's a reason 9 out of 10 fail. And the number one thing, though, if your partner is not behind you, your marriage could fail, everything could go, not just the money, but your health, everything could fall by the wayside. So it's not an easy thing to do, but I think you should start with, it's not just about the idea and the go to market and how am I going to fund it and how am I going to build a team. You need to have a chat with your partner, whoever that may be, and make sure you're both on the train together.
Yeah. I said that to you as well. I think, when I decided to go on my journey, it was tough. I mean, I had all these questions going on in my mind. I mean, I had a stable career. I had the career that a lot of people dreamed of. And, I just something was missing. And I finally got that moment from my wife that said, "Jump, go for it. Jump off the cliff. But if you're gonna do this, you better do this. Go, work your ass off, go all in." And but that support, I'm glad you brought that up because it's so true. What's your wife's name, by the way? Let's give her a
Lynn,
little shout.
yeah,
What is it?
Lynn,
Lynn?
Lynn,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
thank you, Lynn. You're a rare breed, and it's not easy to do, and I'll say the same to Tori, my wife. So,
yeah.
appreciate the wife. So that's
They
a
are
great.
rare breeds, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Hey, folks, let's pause the podcast for a second to talk about one of the companies making the Germinate podcast possible. Want to give a huge thanks to GBGI. Here's Mark Adams.
Thanks, Joe. At our shop in Chardon, Ohio, every part we build is made with precision. From the CNC machining to the final inspection, we don't rush because we know your customers can't afford failure. If you're a dealer or OEM who wants reliability built in, give us a look. GBGI, built to spec, built to last. Learn more at gbgiusa.com. GBGI, grow with us.
Okay, so you have your first business. It blows up, goes to 300 million. Most people say, you know what, I'm gonna go sit on a beach and I'm done. I don't need to do anymore. I did it. Look at that. But that's not in your. It's not in your soul. That's not in your purpose. What was the next step here?
Well, again, a bit of fortune, and also I wanted to get back to my roots, technology,
Mhm.
as a technologist. So, my brother, you may not know this story, but so my late brother unfortunately died a few years ago. But he was in Florida buying a house from a realtor. I think, have I got that pronounced correctly? A real
Realtor? Yep. Yeah.
and that lady, who's still a friend of mine, I'm going to see her in a few weeks. Uh,
The
she was
realtor is still
yeah,
a friend of yours? Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
gotcha. I'm with
So
you.
she lives in Florida, from Michigan originally, herself and her husband, and she was explaining, to my brother about buying a property, and she was talking about her husband. So her name is Joyce Lenhart. Her husband is Ted Lenhart, German origin, but fully born Americans, both from Michigan. Childhood sweethearts to move from Michigan to Florida to enjoy the warmth rather than the cold. And But anyway, so they had a discussion, and then my brother ended up going to dinner with the two of them, with his wife, as only my brother could do, and they were chatting. And then Ted, who was a bit of an inventor, and I don't know if anybody's ever recalls the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but if you do, there's a grandfather in it, and he's the inventor, the mad inventor. So Ted is a bit like the mad inventor, coming up with some great ideas. And Ted was talking to my brother over dinner about the problem with pesticides and crop protection products, that different conventional technologies either were good at drift or good at coverage, but not at both. And he knew about electrostatic technology, but electrostatic technology was good at coverage, terrible at drift. And you also needed a power supply. You couldn't retrofit. It was a standalone solution. And you created an arc in the nozzle that attracted the positively charged material in the atmosphere and clogged the nozzle. And so,
Let me stop you right here. So your brother's having a conversation in Florida about all this stuff. He's buying is your brother buying a property in Florida? Is that
yes,
what he's doing? So
yeah,
he's just out to dinner with his realtor
yeah,
and her husband, and they're starting to talk about uh
yeah,
this heavy science stuff. That's amazing. I love it. Anyway, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep
yeah.
going. This is great.
So then he was talking about all the problems of electrostatic and then maintenance, and it didn't take off. So Ted, crazily, right? He's not a physicist. Started talking about magnets, and he knew they were bipolar, right? Positive, negative charges or affect charge entities. Because everybody thinks of a magnet, you stick it to a fridge, you can pull it. If it's a bigger magnet, it's harder.
Yeah, you put your kids' artwork on the
Yeah.
fridge, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you take iron filings and you have a small magnet, it'll lift so many. Eventually, it'll stop lifting because there's an inherent energy in the magnet, and then it'll lift a certain mass. A bigger magnet does more. Neodymium, the ones we use, are really strong. They'll do lots of things, but there's inherent energy in the magnet. And when you put it to a fridge, you give it to the fridge, but you take it away, you take it back. And but a lot of people don't understand that magnets are very complex things and used in MRI machines. They're used in wind turbines. They're used to generate electricity. But when it comes to magnetic treatment of
Tesla
fluids,
cars. Yeah.
yeah, it makes them unique. If it comes to treatment of fluids, people get, oh, that's a bit snake oil, witchcraft, and voodoo. But anyway, so they were talking about it, and then Ted said, I started playing around with magnets. He just said, God brought this to me, I didn't know what I was doing, and start playing around with magnets, right? And so they made some prototypes, mainly to do with air blast, not with the product we have, with boom spraying. And they did lots of work with the University of Florida, raised about $1 million. And they even did stuff with crop dusters. I have videos on it and fascinating. You can see drift on one side and not on the other. And they got really good results. And at one stage, I think Dow wanted to buy, because there was Dow DuPont at the time, wanted to buy it. Who knows what they wanted to do with it, but they needed to commercialize it. So they got to where they could with it. And then my brother came to me and said, we're struggling. And I had a meeting with them. I used to meet them all the time in Florida. I joined my brother with my family on holidays with his family.
Okay.
So I met Ted and Joyce and I said, look, you guys need to commercialize this. And I wanted to go back to technology. So I put a proposal to them that they remain as shareholders. I would set a company up in Ireland, uh, which is called Agriculture Magnetics Limited. So we ended up doing that. They are shareholders to this day, and in my brother Casey's family. And then I got together with another guy, David Moore, that I worked with in State City and Loctite. And we set up in a place called Nova UCD, which is an incubator in a University College Dublin in Ireland. And basically, you've got a common reception, common labs, and shared offices. So a low cost way to go in and as a base and into an incubator ecosystem. And so we had nothing except my credit card, no salary for 2 years. And in that 2 years, we set about raising, I think, about $1 million, building prototypes, getting prototypes to the field of what is our product now, building the science and physics behind it, developing our first patent. And from there, we scaled it to raise 40 million, spent 10 million in R&D, built out manufacturing. We've a team of about 40 plus people. Big team in the US now, Europe, Australia, our headquarters in Dublin, and built our own crop science centre in the UK, an applied science centre in the UK, an empirical centre in Dublin with Trinity College. And we're now scaling and looking at building manufacturing in the US and a crop science centre in the US, etc.
All from a conversation at a Florida restaurant. That is just that's a wild story. And I think it speaks to you as well to understand when you're having this conversation, you're a successful guy. You go to you're visiting your brother on holiday. You're probably going to Disney World, whatever you're doing in
Yeah,
Florida.
exactly
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. You're bringing your kids over. They're excited. And then you're saying, wait a minute here. This is not only a great opportunity, but it's a way for me to get involved with something that, I have had a love and a passion for my whole entire life, and I kind of slide away from it when I did my first business, and now I'm getting a way to get back. And it's all the power of magnets and how it changes. Basically, it changes fluid, right? I mean, in Lust, to your background there of the screen, MagrowTec is in a sense born, and you just kind of skipped ahead and MagrowTec, and go over that again. How you grew from a conversation to MagrowTec is now basically a worldwide company, all over the world, growing in the United States, growing everywhere.
Yeah, and what we needed to do is that we didn't fully understand how the technology worked in terms of magnetic treatment of fluid. So we built out four scientific pillars. So some people go, "I'm going to build a product and find a market," which is the wrong way to go. Some people build a product and they have a market and they go to market and they try to get enough funding. But when you've got deep tech, because their technology is deep tech, it's using fundamentals of science to solve deep societal problems. That's deep tech. And so we needed to build out a scientific approach. So we knew it was going to take patient capital, 4 or 5 years of building out an empirical set of data with Trinity College in Dublin, building applied science, working with independent research centres in the ag and food space like Wageningen University,
Mhm.
UC Davis, and others. And then customer data, field research data. When you get those pillars aligned
Yeah.
and you have customers using it for 3 or 4 years, then you go and start building your sales and marketing teams and your go-to-market strategy and rolling it out and continue to add to your patents and IP, which we have, as you learn more. So as you go along, you learn more and you can add to your patents and IP. And so we've an IP strategy and we're filing 3 or 4 new patents this year, for example, based on what we've learned over the last few years. And so, by the way, recently in terms of TED and finishing that story, we made a video, a 10-year story video, about a year ago, and poor Ted passed last year, so we got this made in time, and it was one of the things we wanted because we didn't want this story to be lost that I've just told you, and so we had Ted and Joyce talking in our house in Florida, and we had us talking in Nova UCD where it started, all the way through to Trinity, our research centres, to customers talking. And the final shot in that video, if you look online, is Ted on a farm in Florida where all started with a system with MagrowTec on it. And so that gave us the greatest pleasure,
The hair on my neck is standing up, man. That's really cool. That's an awesome story. I love it. I love it.
And
Yeah.
and the first time they got to see that with his family and kids, because we timed it, was Thanksgiving the year before last with all his family. They
Beautiful.
sat and watched it together. That's his
Beautiful.
legacy. That's his legacy.
Yeah.
And so, even though Ted didn't know anything about magnetic treatment of fluid, that little seed, no pun intended, was how
Yep.
it all started. And all I did was just take that bit on and move it and get the scientific rigor, the commercial validation, scientific validation, and build a team and manufacturing and raise the money to bring it to market.
Two things that really stick out in that are number one, I think raising the money, which isn't as it's not an easy thing to do. That's a challenging. I mean, that's a first sales call basically.
Yeah.
But secondly, the importance of IP and protecting your patents. So talk a little bit about those two things. I don't care which order. Maybe talk about kind of raising the money first.
Yeah, yeah. So we started off originally, and again, the Irish government are very helpful through an Irish state body called Enterprise Ireland. They help us at marketing events internationally. They support us at stands. They give grants and so on. But they also give you money. So if you're what's called a high potential startup, and you qualify like we did, they gave us a grant or gave us funding of 250,000, let's say dollars, $250,000. And
Uh-huh.
so I was able to raise $250,000 with me and others to co-match, and suddenly I had $500,000 to get prototypes, We took no salary for 2 years anyway. Some other key people that we could pay. And then I started showing people I had patents, IP, I had a real solution that needed solving. And the problem we solve is pesticide or crop protection waste for your audience. So
Yeah.
with conventional technology, there's either compromise between drift or coverage. We have a patented technology that solves both simultaneously. And at the moment, that's a 60 billion revenue problem. So 60 to 90% of the $60 billion of products sprayed do not stay or hit on the intended crop or weed.
Is in a sense wasted. Yeah.
Waste.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
waste. It either goes into the air through exodrift, or it bounces, scatters, or runs off the weed or crop called endodrift. The droplets are too large or too small. What we do is when we pass the droplets through our magnetic assist technology, these neodymium permanent rare earth magnets, is that we transform the physical properties of the fluid, mainly the water, and doing so, we create more of the right sized droplets that stick. So let's go into the atmosphere, let's bounce or run off, and we dramatically reduce that waste. And so we patented that technology. We can talk about the benefits in a few moments. And so we learn more and we start filing more patents.
Right.
And
Right.
I file more patents and you get validation and customers saying the technology really does what it says it does, over repeated farm cycles in farm conditions, multiple farm conditions. Then you can get other investors who put in money. But the other thing you need is you need people that understand agriculture. They understand patient capital, especially when it's deep tech, and that it's seasonality, and that farmers, like, I think I put some notes here. It's startling actually, so forgive me for turning away for the moment.
No.
But a lady called Beth Ford, who's the CEO of Land of Lakes, she published an article called "A Storm is Gathering in American Agriculture" recently. And she said, somebody asked a question about how many, dairy farms and farmers, and somebody said about 10 million. And she said the correct answer is 24,000 dairy farms and 400,000 growers. And according to her internal estimates, these figures will soon fall to 21,000 and 300,000 respectively. And the finally startling figure, in total, we have only 28% of the farms we had 90 years ago in the US. Right? So you have farmers that have all these fundamental challenges around labor, water shortages. The climate is not behaving the way it used to, whatever way we think about it. And labor is getting more expensive, right? We've got migration issues,
Equipment prices, Yeah.
prices through the roof, input, fertilizer through the roof, and meanwhile commodity prices are flattered, coming down. And so more and more farms are going out of business or they're being acquired. And so you have less farms, maybe bigger farms, and you've got conglomerates taking over. So how do we convince people to farm as well? And the only way to solve that is through innovation, using less to do more, right? And that's where MagrowTec steps in. So having that patent and proving all that, you can get investors to go, okay, you've got a strong ROI for a farmer, you have a good go-to-market, it's proven itself, farmers want it, you're solving real problems, I'm willing to back you.
Yeah.
But has to be patient capital.
Yeah, I think you laid that out perfectly. It's not easy to be a farmer these days, especially maybe that small. In fact, there was an article, I was just trying to find it, so pardon me for looking away too, but there was an article published in our local paper, and I live in Iowa, so there's all sorts of weird percentages, but a huge percentage of Iowa's land is agriculture. Whether what that percentage is, nobody really knows, but it's probably over 80, maybe even close to 90% of our land is. So agriculture is a huge part of this
Yeah.
state. And the article said, the high price of being a farmer today or something along those lines. I can't remember. It's on my LinkedIn if you want to check it out. But you basically just laid it out there. You said all these things are so crazy expensive. And then when we get a year like we've had the last couple of years where commodity prices are really soft, you've got to really find ways to innovate and do better on your farm, really to be able to make money to provide for your family, or
Yeah.
otherwise you're going to risk losing your farm. So I think that's why a product like MagrowTec is so important in today's world, because it makes sense and it also makes money for the farmer. It makes them understand that this is an innovation that actually will work, and I can put it on my sprayer, which is we can talk about sprayers here in a second. A sprayer is a very popular piece of equipment on a farm field. It's
Yeah.
going to run a lot of passes. It didn't used to be, but it is now. So it's a real good place to start. Let's just put it that way. Go ahead and give me your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look at a simple equation as any businessman and or woman and a farmer would be a classic case in point.
Yeah.
So they have the revenue side and the cost side of the equation, which ultimately decides whether you make money or not. And so on the revenue side, you can either increase your prices or increase your market size, and at the moment that's not happening. Prices are the same or coming down. There's geopolitical issues, whatever's happening in China. There's a lot more stuff being produced in Brazil, that are taking some of the market share. There's a lot more competition. So at that side is not really going too well at the moment for a lot of farmers. And then on the other side, you've got, yields declining rapidly, disease pressure increasing. And then the final side is all your inputs are going up. Your labor costs, your crop protection, your fertilizers, your availability of labor, and then you have resistance issues as well. So the only way you can solve your immediate challenges is I've got to somehow reduce costs to survive. And that means I either cut labor, I cut input prices. But if you realize that 60 to 90% of what you spray is waste, it's not doing you any good anyway. So what if you got rid of that waste component? You suddenly become way more profitable. What if you can double your acres sprayed, a day? Or, if I take an example of a video we put out last week, these customer testimonials that we don't pay for them. These are real customers talking about using our tech for 3 or 4 years. That guy, cotton grower in Georgia, he talked about, I'm doing 1,000 acres more a week. Myself and the guys that work for me have the weekend off now with their families, right? I need less sprayers. Think of the cost of those sprayers. You touched on it. I've cut my water rates by 50%. I've cut my rates anything down from 15 gallons an acre to between 5 and 10 gallons an acre. So cutting these chemistry. And then they're getting better control around drift and coverage and disease control, helping to drive the best conditions for yield. So suddenly you're doing less to do more. And so you're making them profitable by being sustainable. Most people think sustainability is a dirty word, right? And people go, oh, it's going to cost me. In a lot of cases, that's true, and I can understand the hesitation. We're very unique in that we don't use energy once it goes on. We actually save across the board in terms of making farmers more productive, efficient, truly using less to do more. And so now we're helping farmers to be profitable or more profitable by being sustainable. And you don't need to compromise. As I call it, a third way.
Yeah, and it's technology, but it's not the technology that we all think. There's no fancy programming, there's not a bunch of software, there's not hardware, and we can now I wanna get into the kind of the features and the benefits and the how. And my little 30,000 feet, I think I've told you this before. I've told this on the podcast many times. I walk into a room with 10 guys, 9 of them are way smarter than me, and this is definitely the case here, but here's my view on it. You touched on it. We're wasting a bunch of chemicals out there, and so in order to not waste the chemicals, you have to optimize the droplet size. If it's too big, it just runs off and goes in the ground. If it's too small, it just drifts off and goes off into Never Never Land. It's gotta be the right size, and plus MagrowTec makes that droplet the right size. That's the feature and the benefit. And it does it in a way that doesn't use software, all this crazy it's technology with magnets, which are unbelievably a fascinating element. Everybody should do some research on the power of magnets, by the way. But anyway, I kinda laid it out. I teed it up for you. You can go into a little bit more further detail on it. So fire away.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just to summarize, so when we put a kit onto a sprayer, magnetic assist technology, it's usually there's a booster system, a rod system in the spray line, and there's a kit, aluminum for our US colleagues. I think how you pronounce it, we say aluminium, but aluminum and we have permanent rare earth neodymium magnets inside those manifolds. We use aluminium because it's pretty inert to magnetic fields, and in the rods we use a stainless steel outer core that's inert. It doesn't have really iron, cobalt, or nickel in it that would compete with the magnetic field, and it protects the delicate nickel coating that's on those magnets that stops them rusting. So we don't want the chemical to corrode. So there's an outer layer that's inert, and then it allows the magnetic field when the fluid passes by to affect the charge entities in the water. And in doing so, when it comes through the nozzle, we allow farmers to use small to medium nozzles without worrying about airborne drift. And when we do so, we change the droplets in such a way that they have properties that coalesce, that we have less of the smaller droplets going into the air. And then we have droplets that are not too big, the bounce, scatter, run off. And we change their adhesive properties that they stick better. And when you do so, you get everything that a farmer wants, because a farmer knows that one large droplet could be the equivalent of 100 small droplets. Small is better. The problem they have up until now is exodrift or airborne drift, or indeed they're too big, runoff drift. Now you can solve that problem. Now the technology itself, I had a meeting with my US colleagues and team and fellow employees. We were in Amana with some of our customers that are using our technology in the colonies. They've got 3 of our systems, really happy. And they had it on the See and Spray sprayer. They had it on 3 Hadji sprayers. So we're complementary to all technologies. There's no cables, wires, moving parts. And once it goes on, you can move it from sprayer to sprayer. And the guy in Georgia actually on the video talks about moving it from an Agco to a case to a John Deere. And he
Nice.
did
Yeah.
it himself, right? He
Yeah.
did it himself.
Yeah.
And we don't create stack problems, and we don't devalue the sprayer or the technology. Anyway, so when I met with the team, we were talking about when a customer asks, how does the technology work? Well, we made a 2-minute video to make it easy. Most people don't know much about magnetic treatment of fluid. That's fair enough, unless you understand physics. So I brought with me 2 things. I brought this book about 400 pages long about the magnetic treatment of fluids and water by Professor Mike Cowie from Trinity College in Dublin, who we work with. And I also presented another 40-page document about adjuvants and surfactants from a well-known university, on the chemistry of adjuvants and surfactants, which are wetting and sticking agents, right? A lot of our growers have stopped using those products because we do such a good job wetting and sticking, right? But anyway, one was about the chemistry of, whereas we do through physics. There's a bit of chemistry, but mainly through physics on the water side. So they're looking at these 2 documents and they can't understand anything, right? Because they're all about, in our case, quantum mechanics, high-level mathematics, and high-level physics, right? The other case, it's mainly chemistry and a bit of biology. So the question came to me saying, well, we appreciate, Gary, you bringing those along, but we don't understand them. And I said, exactly. You have to be very careful how you answer that question to the customer. You have to say what our standard answer is, show them the video, and say, if they want to know anything more, it's our IP or under NDA, or in there's certain circumstances, we can go back to the technical team and answer the question, because you will not know what you're saying. You could talk about viscosity, how it flows, the rheological properties, or surface tension, the angle of the drop, but you don't know what that means. And then
Yeah.
you'll down a rabbit hole you can't get out of, and you'll make
Yeah.
the situation worse. So that's one angle. But our science is, it's to do with, the number of magnets, the size, the strength, the shape, the orientation, north, south, south, north, about the actual field gradients. And the field gradients, if you have a magnet and you have iron filings, you'll see the magnetic domain and field around the magnet. That's what we mean by field gradients. We have field strength, magnetic flux, thing called magnetic damping. Then you have the conductivity of the water. These are the charged entities in the water. And what I mean about that is all water is hard or soft. So unless it's deionized, which is pure water made in a lab, well water and tap water is full of metals. It picks it up as the water runs, rainwater runs over rocks. So it can be, over limestone, granite. So it picks up magnesium, calcium, other things in the water. And so they determine if the water is hard or soft. And so the good news is our technology works with all forms of hard or soft water. But the more we understand about the water, the better we can make the product for the farmers. So Danny Burnett in Chicago or Illinois, he says his water's so hard he can chew it. Uh, so he's got different wells, and even the wells are all different. And so our technology takes advantage of the nature of water by impacting these charge entities in the water and changing the droplets. And the final thing is, if any of your readers ever want to look up the science of droplets themselves, forget about MagrowTec and magnetic treatment of droplets. The science of droplets is extremely complicated in its own right.
I can imagine. Yeah.
A very complicated subject.
Well, I think, yeah. First of all, folks, you can understand we got a brilliant mind here on the other. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. I think what what I kind of took out of that is you more or less took a very complex thing and made it very, very simple for a market to, we found the problem. The problem's obvious, I think, for all farmers that listening to this. We found the solution, and it's a very, very complicated, complex solution. If you want to know about it, you have millions of dollars of research behind it, years and years of research behind it. There's books written all over the place. You can dive in really deep if you want.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, it's time to simplify it and just provide the ROI to the farmer, to the grower that, hey, let's get after it and let's make sure that you're putting food on the table for your family, because you got to find innovative ways to make a living. And you've got the research and the backing behind this product. It's obvious. You just kind of walked us through that. Millions of dollars of research behind this product.
And you'll find this fascinating. I'm actually talking tomorrow to a group of people from Kansas and Iowa.
Okay.
A lot of your listeners, I'm sure, who can't wait for the college football season to start.
Yep.
First game is in Dublin, rightly or
That's
wrong.
right. The Iowa State fans watch it. In fact, a lot of them are already over there. They're probably
Yeah,
drinking beer right now, getting ready
I'll
for it.
be in the Guinness factory. I have the unfortunate thing to talk to them tomorrow with probably sore heads. So tomorrow, I hope they enjoy themselves. So tomorrow, actually, through Enterprise Ireland, and we have, I think, the governor from Kansas and Iowa who will be there.
Oh, nice.
One of the Irish ministers for Enterprise will be there, and we're going to be talking. Several companies are presenting, including myself, and I'm going to a CEO dinner afterwards. But we're going to be talking about MagrowTec in the US, not just what we're doing throughout the US, what we're doing in Iowa, with places like Amana, what we're planning to do with our manufacturing, our crop science center. We're going to be talking about the learnings of an Irish company working in the US, how you can do things better, as in us, from our end, from Irish companies, and how the whole thing has worked, and how we're engaging and how we're helping each other to solve global problems, and how we're innovating together. So I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. So in terms of farmers themselves, I forgot to mention. So one of the things we did at the beginning is that we're not the experts, the farmer is. And so we went through 7 iterations of our technology to make sure it's maintenance free. So when you said, if anybody wants to learn about their technology, they can look at the 2-minute how does it work video, they can do a deep dive. But ultimately for everybody, they just need to listen to what the farmers are saying on those video testimonials, because these are farmers that are using technology throughout the US, throughout Europe and Australia, under different soil conditions, environmental conditions, farm conditions, different equipment. And they're all saying the same thing. I'm getting an ROI, typically less than a year. It's doing everything MagrowTec said, but it's their words, not ours, after a number of seasons.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a little mustard seed that's continuing to grow and grow and grow. Before too long, somebody might look back on this podcast and in a couple of years and be like, "Holy crap, they were talking about and now MagroTech's on everything," because it is so simple and it makes so much sense. So I love that, and the power of partnerships as well. Talk a little bit about that. You've partnered with a lot of folks, specifically in the U.S. I know the U.S. excites you. It's a market that really excites you, and you partner with farmers and all sorts of other folks to take this mustard seed and grow it into this exciting thing that is building momentum as we speak.
Yeah, well, I think there's a bit of bias by me because I love, my history has been working with American companies and I love it. I learned a lot and they've been so good to me. But also, I do know from that is that America is usually the best at a lot of things. It's one of the biggest farming producing countries in the world. Not that it doesn't have its challenges like everywhere else in the world. They're innovators, early adopters once you gain their trust, as in the farmers. But you must prove it. As I go, show, don't tell, show me it works, don't tell me, so gain the trust, and they're the best people in the world. Really helpful as well. Innovators, as I mentioned, early adopters. There's a great base of big companies there across, the grain companies to growers to chemical companies to OEMs. They're nearly all headquartered in the US. So if you can crack the US, you can crack anywhere else, right? The
Right.
other is English is very important. You're dealing. I'm slow to say one culture because I understand each state is different and each state has its own nuance, and it's like Ireland, a small country like Ireland. We've 26 counties and they're all different. But
Right. Right.
we have a common overall theme and culture. So, English does help, in terms of language, ease of doing business, lack of bureaucracy. On the other hand, the European Union, 27 countries, different languages, different cultures. It's more regulatory hurdles to overcome. So, it's easy to decide why the America is our most important market. And we're certainly having faster traction, building better relationships. And we've started to get some big partners. We obviously have dealers and growers. We're beginning to talk to co-ops. But interestingly, we're beginning to talk to chemical companies, both biological and conventional. And you think about it, even though we say, and even co-ops that sell these products, that there's a lot of waste. At the end of the day, everybody wants to get these products on targets because, they've got a certain shareholder base. They're public companies. They need to be seen to, protect the environment, save water. Who doesn't want to do that? They need to make sure farmers survive, so they remain customers. They don't want farmers going out of business to buy their products. So if they can help farmers to get these products on target, to drive yield, to help farmers be more productive, make money to feed their families before they feed the world. And then we also have resistance issues. So for the chemical companies are suffering. There's less products being made. So a lot of people wouldn't know that it takes typically 10 to 14 years to get a conventional chemistry product approved. So, and you have a 1 in 10 chance of succeeding, and it takes about $250 million. So there's less and less to it for farmers. There's resistance issues. So we need these products being made, but they need to get approved. But so there's less products being made, a bit like antibiotics. So we've got to guard what we have, like glyphosate and, glufosinate, Roundup and Liberty and so on. So there's a threat to those products. There's resistance issues. So where we help all of these companies is that we help them get on target. We minimize environmental exposure and consumer knockback. We help drive yields. We help fight resistance, kill pests, help farmers to be more productive, efficient, and profitable. And then, if you think about growers, we have to feed more people, right? We're 8 billion. I don't think it'll go to 10 billion. It'll certainly go to 9 billion. People are going higher up the food chain. They want more protein. They want other, high
Mhm.
crops. And so there's a thing called, I don't know if you've ever heard of Overshoot Day. If you haven't, look it up. So there's a thing called Overshoot Day. And so every year in this planet, because we have to feed more people and less scarce resources like land, water, and other valuable things that we need in this earth, we borrow from the future like a bank. And so years ago, that used to be in October, November, December. Every year, this year it's in July. So some date in July this year, we started borrowing from future generations for us now
Hmm.
and on things of these resources. So
Right.
we've got to change that equation, whether it's farmers,
That's not
consumers.
going to end well. Yeah.
No,
That's not a good thing.
that's
Yeah.
where innovation comes in again. So,
Yeah.
I'll come back to partnerships now. So we have chemical companies that are saying, well, they make biologics and they make conventional, and they started testing our technology and go, hey, we want to grow our sales. We want to, grow our sales of biologics. And we see your technology is playing a part. So we're doing big trials with those. And one of them is a biologic company out of Australia, and they've set up a European base in California, and they're working with Maha, believe it or not, on
I definitely want to touch on that before we roll out of here. But yeah, but keep going on your chemical
yeah.
company in Australia.
So they started out of Australia with us, and they tested different spraying technology, and they have this super concentrate biologic, and let's say they're 1,000. I'll keep it in European Australian terms, but they're 1,000 liters per hectare with their product is where they're at with conventional technology.
Mhm.
So for your listeners, a hectare is about 2.2 acres, just to put things in
Yep.
context.
Yep.
So you just multiply by 2.2, or roughly double will get you
Double
there.
it. Yeah.
And so basically, they started working with our product and got numbers way lower than that. So we invited them to our crop science center in the UK, and they've gone down to below 400 liters per hectare from 1,000 with our super concentrate. And now they've got that approved in the US, that product. And they set up a team in California. And so we're currently installing, and we're going to be doing demo days with their team and their COO, who's a farmer themselves, with nut growers and orchard growers in California. And the idea is that This is now an affordable product. By getting it down to those rates, you can get it at the glufosinate level, price per acre. So now
Mhm.
you have a direct biologic replacement that's affordable. And here's the key thing. The problem with biologic products is they're less toxic, which is great, but usually they need multiple passes, which defeat the purpose, because if they're less toxic, you need their contact, you need a higher dose transfer, and that usually means more passes. And what does that mean? More labor machine hours. Well, we just spent a lot of time talking about that's the wrong way to go.
Right.
But if you can deliver biologics at the right droplet size, at optimum passes, you crack the code and you make those products affordable and an option. So we're doing that in California. We're doing the same on vines in Australia, in vineyards, and we would be doing that in California. And finally, we're doing demos in Michigan on our test farm with some of the Maha folk, and they're going to be attending those trials in California. And the idea is that there's about 3 million of regenerative acres. And I'll give you my view on regenerative acres, right? It's laudable, but there's a lot of waffle being spoken about regenerative ag at the moment
Mhm.
because you still need to burn down the crop, and usually they use conventional chemistry.
Yep.
So what you want to do is you want to use a combination of three things. You want to eliminate conventional spray passes and then minimize the number of passes. And when you do use them, you want to use less. So completely eliminate the conventional. Just let me delete this call here. Um, so you want to eliminate conventional spray events. You want to reduce what you spray when you do spray, and finally, you want to grow biologics in optimum passes, and that's your holy grail. And so for the regenerative ag people, that's how we're going to try and do it.
Yeah. Every stone, every rock, every piece of research, folks, you can tell Gary's heart, Gary's soul is in this. He's uncovering these things so you, the customer, can find a product that is researched, that is developed. I think the word optimize comes to mind. That's what we all need to look for when we're looking at kind of new products. Does it optimize what I'm currently doing? Because you mentioned it, man. We're gonna have no choice but to do these things.
Yeah.
This is the world we're living in, and Maha is an interesting movement, and it might make things regulated to where we kind of have no choice but to do these things. So keep your eyes on that. Keep your eyes on what's happening. Uh, Finally, man, I just want to end with you've got this mind, you've got this entrepreneurial mind. I know all your focus right now is going on MagrowTec, but what's the vision in the next 2 to 3 years for MagrowTec? What about your own personal vision? Do you see yourself starting multiple other companies? Are you ever gonna wind down on that beach with that Mai Tai someday, or is that not in the cards for you?
Okay, okay. Well, what I'll say to you about
Oh.
MagroTech is that we're a science and technology company, deep tech. We haven't got time today to talk about. We've a pipeline of products coming around air blasts for for vineyards, for orchards, and the nut industry. We have a product for irrigation. Work we did with the USDA showed that we needed to use. There was higher yields, less plant stress, all their work, and use 34% less water. That'll be a game changer on the irrigation side. Products for crop dusting, for drone spraying. Again, treating the fluid is the way we're going to tackle that. And then non-ag applications in the medical space, treating brackish water, treating salty water, purifying water using our technology. So what we've done there is that we've what's called three horizon timeline. So between 25 and 26, it's accelerating this product in existing markets, putting crop science centers in the US, manufacturing in the US, expanding our teams and our partners, then entering South America, Asia, and then launching our other products in turf and lawn, for example, air blast and so on, and building the sales and marketing, more patents and more research centers, and then morph into the non-ag. And by the way, our plan, we worked on it. We looked at all the opportunities. We looked at our technology readiness level score, our go-to-market, our customers' ROI, return on investment, our ROI, gross margin, and then we prioritize them. And that's the plan that the whole team knows we're working off. And we have a filter on how to address that. In terms of myself, we have an emerging nanotechnology, by the way, in terms of those droplets, how we can use those potentially to treat cancer in a safe way without damaging your gut cells using
Wow,
nanobots.
crazy. I
That's
love
for
it.
another day. That's for another day. As a science tech company. So I'm fascinated by all things science and new. So I have some ideas in the medical space, how people can use ready to use information, their own information in a better way that would proactively manage their health better than currently they do with doctors or GPs. So that's something in due course I'd like to get up and running with partners. Won't run it because I love what I do in MagrowTec. So I think I'll always be an entrepreneur. Maybe I'll be able to bring in people that can do the day-to-day better than I can. But I keep involved through innovation for sure. And then my final thing is we have this project with small farm holders. The 65% of the world's farmers have about maybe 4 acres to 8 hectares. They're the poorest of the poor in South America, Asia, and Africa. In Africa and Ethiopia alone, there's 20 million of them. They can't feed themselves, never mind the world. But there's plenty of land there. So we did testing, over 2 years in Kenya and Ethiopia. And at the end of it all, they were growing 300% more food, feeding their families, using half the chemical in the water. So what I want to do is try and get that on as many smallholder farms as we can in a sustainable way. Because if we do that, we will stop migration. We'll stop people trying to move to other countries. And then we'll solve that problem as well. And, people can go, I don't need to beg. I can feed my families, and maybe I can even export some food. So that's an important thing. And finally, we have this big food and water challenge we talked about. We need 30% more food. We need, way more water. We've got this big food and water challenge we've talked about. So we help farmers to be profitable or more profitable by being sustainable. So if my legacy, and it's on my gravestone, that this guy and his team helped to support the sustainable intensification of global food production, I'll die a happy man.
Attaboy. Well, Mr. Gary Wickham, a brilliant man. Everybody needs to follow you on your socials too. So follow Gary on LinkedIn for sure. How to get in touch with MagrowTec? Go ahead and give those props out right now.
Yeah, on magrotech.com, and you can follow the various Facebook and social media handles as well. With some great testimonial videos of ultimately customers from around the world talking about 3 or 4 or 5 year experience.
Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you so much for coming on and educating us. I'm fascinated by your work. I'm fascinated by your mind. I'm fascinated by the team you've built, and I'm super impressed. So the world needs more of you for sure. So,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gary Wickham, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Germinate podcast. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others in the industry. And join me next time as we continue to explore the innovations and strategies shaping the future of agriculture and business. Until then, keep growing, keep innovating, and keep germinating your success.